A new and damaging front has opened in the ongoing US-Canada trade dispute, sending shockwaves through the global economy and raising the stakes for both nations. What began as a series of heated negotiations and tit-for-tat tariffs has now evolved into a full-blown confrontation, threatening to unravel decades of economic cooperation and trust. The world's most integrated economic relationship is now under threat, as cross-border trade slows and uncertainty grips businesses on both sides. The seamless flow of goods, services, and people that once defined the Canada-US border is being replaced by delays, inspections, and a growing sense of unease. In a bold and unprecedented move, Canada is redirecting vital energy exports away from its southern neighbor, sending oil and gas to Asian markets instead. This strategic pivot comes as a direct response to aggressive tariffs and trade barriers imposed by the Trump administration, signaling a major shift in North American energy dynamics. The dispute has escalated rapidly, transforming what was once a war of words into concrete economic action. Political leaders on both sides are digging in, with rhetoric intensifying and public opinion hardening. For decades, American refineries depended on a steady, reliable stream of Canadian energy. That era of certainty and mutual benefit is now in jeopardy as supply chains are disrupted and long-standing agreements are called into question. President Trump has publicly condemned Canada's actions, calling them a betrayal and vowing to respond with even tougher measures. The relationship between two of the world's closest allies has rarely been so strained, with leaders exchanging sharp words and threats. The implications of this standoff are profound. Energy security is now a pressing concern, as are the stability of supply chains and the economic well-being of millions of workers and families who depend on cross-border trade. In the US, consumers are already feeling the pinch with rising energy costs, while Canadian workers and businesses face the looming threat of recession as they seek new markets and greater economic independence. As world leaders watch anxiously and global markets react, the path forward remains uncertain. Both countries, and the world at large, are bracing for further escalation, knowing that the outcome of this conflict could reshape the future of international trade and energy for years to come. The crisis is the result of months of escalating rhetoric and economic measures. For months, tensions had been simmering between the United States and Canada, two of the world's closest trading partners. What began as heated words and threats soon escalated into a full-blown economic confrontation, with both sides unwilling to back down. The world watched as the relationship between these neighboring countries, once defined by cooperation and mutual benefit, began to unravel in real time. President Trump's sweeping 25% tariff on nearly all Canadian imports stunned Ottawa, ending hopes for negotiation. The move was sudden and dramatic, sending shockwaves through global markets and leaving Canadian officials scrambling to respond. The tariffs targeted a wide range of goods, from steel and aluminum to everyday consumer products, threatening thousands of jobs on both sides of the border. In response, Prime Minister Trudeau and provincial leaders, especially Ontario's Doug Ford, threatened to cut off energy exports to key U.S. states. This was not just political posturing. Canada supplies a significant portion of America's oil and gas, and any disruption would have immediate consequences for U.S. industries and consumers. Ford's warning to halt energy exports underscored Canada's frustration and willingness to weaponize its most critical export. The message was clear: Canada would not be bullied, and it was prepared to use its economic leverage to defend its interests. When the tariffs took effect, Canada swiftly began diverting energy shipments, demonstrating it would not be held hostage by U.S. pressure. Tankers that once headed south were rerouted to new markets overseas, and Canadian workers adapted quickly to the new reality, determined to minimize the damage to their own economy. This was no symbolic gesture, it was a strategic move to inflict maximum economic pain on the U.S. The impact was immediate. American factories reliant on Canadian energy faced shutdowns, and economic analysts warned of a deepening trade war that could ripple across the continent. The trade war had become a matter of national pride and survival for Canada. Across the country, citizens rallied behind their leaders, determined to stand strong in the face of adversity and protect their economic future. The tables had turned, with both sides now locked in a high-stakes standoff. As negotiations grew more intense, the world waited to see which nation would blink first, knowing that the outcome would shape the future of North American trade for years to come. The United States is deeply dependent on Canadian energy, a relationship that has quietly shaped the economies and daily lives of millions on both sides of the border for decades. This partnership is not just about convenience. It's a fundamental pillar of North American energy security and economic stability. In fact, a staggering 62% of America's crude oil imports come from Canada, making it by far the largest foreign supplier. This isn't just a statistic, it means that every day, American cars, trucks, and industries are powered by Canadian oil. Over 1.4 million barrels of Canadian crude flow south daily, feeding a network of U.S. refineries that have been specifically designed and optimized to process this type of heavy crude. These refineries, many of which are located in the Midwest and Gulf Coast, rely on a steady, predictable supply from their northern neighbor. But the energy connection doesn't stop at oil. The dependency extends to electricity as well. There are 35 major high-voltage transmission lines that cross the US-Canada border, quietly delivering power to millions of American homes and businesses every single day. States like Michigan, New York, and Vermont are especially reliant on Canadian hydroelectricity, which is not only abundant but also clean and renewable. This imported power helps keep the lights on and reduces carbon emissions in these regions. The physical infrastructure that supports this relationship is vast and complex. More than 70 oil and gas pipelines crisscross the border, forming the backbone of North American energy. These pipelines are critical arteries moving not just oil but also natural gas and other fuels that heat homes and power factories. In 2021 alone, Canadian energy exports to the U.S. were valued at an astonishing $112 billion, a figure that dwarfs the value of U.S. energy exports heading north. This massive trade imbalance highlights just how much the U.S. relies on Canadian resources to meet its energy needs. This asymmetry gives Canada significant leverage in trade negotiations and energy policy discussions. It's a strategic advantage that Canadian leaders are well aware of, especially during times of political or economic tension. The Midwest and Northeast regions of the U.S. are particularly vulnerable to any disruption in this cross-border energy flow. Their refineries and power grids have been built around the expectation of a reliable Canadian supply, making them susceptible to shortages or price spikes if that supply is threatened. Recent events like the Trump administration's tariffs and Canada's swift retaliation have exposed just how precarious this arrangement can be. What was once seen as a simple trade lever has now become a potential flashpoint, putting entire regions at risk. As tensions rise, what seemed like a straightforward exchange of resources is now a direct threat to U.S. energy security, reminding us that energy independence is more complicated and more fragile than it might appear. Facing U.S. tariffs, Canada is pivoting to Asia, seeking new markets for its energy. Tankers now carry Canadian oil and gas across the Pacific to China, Japan, and South Korea. Years of investment in West Coast infrastructure are paying off, with new pipelines and LNG terminals fast-tracked. This pivot signals to Washington that Canada is building a future beyond the American market. Asian economies welcome Canada as a stable supplier, eager to diversify away from the Middle East. Long-term contracts are being negotiated, cementing a new axis of trade. The journey is costly and complex, but Canada's political will is strong. The Asian pivot is seen as essential for long-term economic sovereignty. For Americans, the impact is immediate. Higher prices at the pump as Canadian oil supplies shrink. Analysts predict petrol could jump 30 to 70 cents per gallon, hitting household budgets hard. Utility bills will rise in states reliant on Canadian electricity, with some facing potential blackouts. The loss of Canadian hydropower could cost New England states hundreds of millions. Inflation will worsen as higher energy costs ripple through the economy, raising prices on goods and services. Businesses may pass costs to consumers, lay off workers, or delay investments. The architects of the tariffs underestimated the critical role of integrated energy markets. For millions, the trade war is about to become a costly reality. The Midwest's refineries are ground zero for the crisis. Many are designed for Canadian heavy crude and can't easily switch to other sources. States like Illinois and Michigan face existential threats to their refining operations. The fourth largest U.S. refinery in Illinois relies almost entirely on Canadian oil. Without it, operations could be slashed or shut down, causing fuel shortages and price spikes. Thousands of jobs are at risk, with ripple effects across the regional economy. The Midwest, once promised revitalization, now faces downturn due to tariff policy. The crisis exposes the dangers of disrupting a deeply integrated energy system. Canada's pivot to Asia is bold but risky. The U.S. has been a profitable, convenient market for decades. Replacing it is costly and complex. Short-term pain is likely job losses, lost revenue, and potential recession if the trade war escalates. Infrastructure bottlenecks could limit exports, forcing Canadian producers to sell at a discount. Economists warn of GDP decline, rising inflation, and up to 150,000 lost jobs. Canada is betting that long-term diversification outweighs short-term costs. The move has strong domestic support, but risks the stability provided by U.S. ties. The government is gambling it can weather the storm and emerge stronger. Neither side expects a quick resolution. Both are digging in for a long fight. The Trump administration is considering more tariffs, targeting other Canadian industries. Canada is finalizing retaliatory tariffs aimed at key U.S. political districts. Over $700 million is being allocated to bolster Canadian border security. Businesses on both sides are scrambling to adapt, facing deep uncertainty. The integrated North American economy, once a strength, is now a vulnerability. The dispute is part of a global context of rising trade tensions and shifting alliances. The risk of miscalculation grows, threatening to permanently alter the continent's economic landscape. The U.S.-Canada energy showdown is a stark warning to the world. Decades of partnership can unravel quickly under political pressure and protectionism. The border, once a symbol of peace, is now a front line in a trade war with global implications. Economic interdependence creates both wealth and vulnerability. Both nations are set to suffer. Americans face higher costs, Canadians risk recession. The conflict will ripple through global markets, redrawing energy maps and alliances. The era of predictable, rules-based trade is giving way to volatility and nationalism. The world watches to see if these neighbors can step back from the brink, and what their choices mean for global cooperation.